Welcome to Not Like the Others, the podcast that invites you to lean into curiosity. I'm your host, Elle, and I believe that by sharing our messy and unusual stories, we can discover our shared humanity and find connection in a world that often feels increasingly disconnected. Join me and my guests as we explore our unique paths and share our experiences with adversity, mental health, relationships and parenting, technology and spirituality, and more. Before we dive into today's conversation, I want to take a moment to set the space. This episode is a deep dive into some of the heavier chapters of my story and the story of my dear friend Jason Price. We're talking about religious trauma, the weight of shame, and what it's like to grow up in Rapture culture. I want to be clear. This episode is not an indictment of faith, but rather a candid exploration about the institutional pressures that often get in the way of our personal connection to the divine. In fact, I still carry a deep love for the community that showed up for my family during some of our darkest hours. This conversation is about the difference between a business and a belief and what happens when the human noise gets in the way of a genuine connection with a higher power. Whether you're a practicing Christian, someone who has walked away, or you're somewhere in the middle, you're welcome here. We're just two friends sharing our own stories in hopes that they reach someone who needs to hear it. All right. I am so excited to have one of my best friends, Jason Price, back on the podcast tonight. Jason, thank you so much for coming back on and joining me for season 2 of Not Like the Others.
Happy to be here.
I am so excited for this episode because, well, we've been talking about it for a long time.
Months now.
Yeah. And I think that it was something I had to sit with because as I've thought about where I wanted to take the pod, you know, what I wanted season 2 to look like and how I wanted to turn the volume up, something really came out for me over the past few months, which is like really speaking our truths, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not glossing over anything. I don't think I've really done that in season 1, but I think we need to go deeper.
I agree. I think that you've broken the ice of having the podcast at this point, and now you are more comfortable to go places that maybe you weren't comfortable enough to go before.
I think it's more important than ever to tell the truth about who we are, to be authentic, to be vulnerable, to speak up loudly, and to be brave. I just released my first episode of season 2. And we talked a little bit about that with Trish Tierney, the co-founder of Wake, about how there never really was like a middle ground. Like you either stand up for what's right or you don't.
I mean, if you think about it, I believe it was Martin Luther King that said, it's not, I can't remember the exact quote, the deafening silence of the woes who said nothing or something to that effect. You know, it wasn't necessarily the people committing the offenses. It was the privileged people that stood by and let it happen.
Yeah. And one thing I learned through this pod, through writing, through just being increasingly authentically myself and vulnerable with people is that just by doing that, you show people how to do it for themselves. You give them permission to do it for themselves too. And so that's what I'm excited to do here tonight is like, just, this is a chat that I think people need to hear and is highly topical for the beginning of 2026.
I mean, for me personally, just in the last year, since the election, have I become more aware of this? I'm not even sure how to label this, what it is, but the awareness of its presence in my life and in my past and how it affects my present. And all of that is very recent. It's all since, really since the election.
Yeah. And so this, to clarify for listeners, is we're going to talk about religious trauma and growing up in the South in a conservative and religious household, how that shaped our identities respectively, and the residual maladaptive coping mechanisms that came with that, and the shame and the fear and the guilt and the suppression that came with a lot of that as well. Yeah, this has been heavy on my heart too. I think this actually we started this conversation privately
We
when
did.
you were sending me TikToks about the impending rapture.
Yeah, yeah. The Rapture talk. I think that was supposed to happen in September or something in
But it was
August.
supposed to happen a few
Obviously, we
times, I
missed
think, in
it.
2025.
Yeah, yeah.
Whoops, it didn't show up for
I
me.
guess we're left behind.
To be honest, though, it kind of tracks because this definitely feels like a left behind plot, whatever's happening.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah, I think that is exactly. I think my text message to you was after I sent the TikTok video is, did you also grow up with Rapture culture? Can we just talk about that for a minute? And I sent that to several of my friends that I'm close with like that, and almost everyone responded similarly. You know?
yeah. Well, it unlocked something in me, right?
Yeah.
And then I started talking about it with everybody because forgot. I forgot that I grew up
Yeah.
with the fear of
Of
people
demise.
disappearing
Yeah. Like,
and me being left behind because I'm a sinner and
right.
there's cars crashing into each other
Yeah.
and I'd be left behind to fend for myself in the apocalypse because my parents were clearly saved,
Obviously, they were going and you weren't. Yeah.
which like has so many layers there alone, just
Oh, yeah.
that.
Totally.
Considering my dad is a
A
felonious.
problem.
Yeah. lots of things to unpack there, but you know what I mean? Like, so anyway, so that's what we're going to talk about. And let's start out before we get like too in the weeds ahead of ourselves. I think we should just set the scene.
Sure.
So you are the partner of one of my very best friends, Daniel, and I'm so grateful that you came into my life through
There he
Daniel.
is.
So you're gay. You're an openly gay man who,
As a goose.
yeah, who's from the South, in case you can't tell by all of his hilarious sayings that are just so Southern and lovely. But like gay as a goose. But like, so set the scene. Like, what was that like? Just tell me about it. I want to hear
So
about
I
how you grew
guess
up.
so we're setting the scene for people who don't know anything about us, I suppose. So I grew up in Upper East Tennessee, so the very, eastern tip of the state of Tennessee that borders North Carolina and Virginia. So literally you could go 30 minutes one way and be in North Carolina. You could go 10, 15 minutes the other way and you could be in Southwest Virginia. So this is the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in the valley between the Appalachians and the Great Smoky Mountains. It is probably one of the most conservative places that a person could live. It is deeply, I guess we would call that the Bible Belt. I don't really know how to define exactly what the Bible Belt is, but it is deeply in the Bible Belt. There are churches on every corner. As a matter of fact, in Kingsport, which is the town that I grew up in, there is there's a lot of roundabouts, traffic roundabouts, and there's a in the center of town, downtown, there's called Church Circle, and it's a roundabout, and it's nothing but churches. So,
Wow.
and it's First Baptist Church, First Methodist Church, First Presbyterian Church, and I don't remember what the other one is, but um, that is essentially, if you Google Kingsport, Tennessee, that image will show up 1,000 times in your search history. That is like the hallmark image of the city of Kingsport is the church circle.
Yeah.
So I was born in 1985, so makes me comfortably right in the middle of millennialism. Kingsport itself probably, I would say, is a 20 years behind the current times, in terms of just a lot of things. I mean, thinking, technology, opportunities. And here, this is interesting. It pains me to say that
Yeah.
because it while that is the center of where all the things that are bad that ever happened to me occurred, it's still my home.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a lot of very mixed emotions about Kingsport and about being in Kingsport. And I can tell you, kind of the story of leaving Kingsport and coming back to Kingsport because that was a very profound event too. But yeah, a millennial born in 85, growing up in the late 80s, early 90s.
Were you always out?
No. um, no, I didn't really come out publicly until I was 18. And that was I was out of the house. That was the key is I had to be out of the house.
Yeah. Highly relatable.
Yeah. Yeah, I was not I was out in high school to a few select friends. And I actually had some boyfriends in high school, but my family was none the wiser of the relationship that I had with these dudes. They just, thought they were friends. But I came out when I was 18 to my family, and it did not go well. It
Wow.
did not go over well at all, actually. So that kind of sets the scene of my upbringing. I guess there was two different dynamics at play in my upbringing. My mother's family, upper middle class, deeply religious, church going people,
Mm-hmm.
and then which has their own set of complexities. My father's family, not poor by any means, but drinking, smoking, redneck bonfires, just the hunting, fishing redneck men.
Hillbillies.
Hillbillies, yeah. I mean, said with love, but
Yeah.
just and that side of the family was far more fun. And my parents were divorced when I was 4, so my time was split significantly between these two polar opposite families of at the cross where I first saw the light and Ray's Helldale. Like I
Yeah.
mean, and I enjoyed Ray's Helldale a lot more than at the cross where I first saw the light. So it was
I can
just
understand that.
like right, yeah, And so it was an interesting dynamic to grow up in. But the common denominator in both of those families is being gay was not all right
Yeah.
in either way for a lot of different reasons, but neither of those environments were a friendly or warm place for a flamboyantly gay kid, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And I want to dive deeper into that
Yeah.
in a moment. I think there's a lot of things that you touched on actually that I want to dive deeper into because I
Hmm.
think are highly relatable from my own experience too. Because I grew up in Florida.
Right.
My parents had me when they were teenagers. They
Right.
dropped out of school to have me their senior year and ended up getting their GEDs. And,
Hmm.
my mom came from a pretty poor family and a very
Hmm.
abusive family. And my dad was adopted into um it's similar, I think, like not a poor family. They were
Yeah.
like solidly middle class,
Yeah.
Catholic family.
Mm.
And he was adopted and yeah, like just grew up Catholic. And then so of course you can imagine when my parents both who grew up in religious households um found out, went to their parents saying like, hey, we're pregnant at
That
17.
wasn't received well, I'm sure.
No, no, not at all. But I think what was so interesting was that then when they, went on to get married, they had me, obviously, um, how that experience fueled my own religious upbringing and how
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
brought us up. Me,
Yeah.
my sister, and my brother, their relationship to sex, their
God.
relationship
Yeah.
to, yeah, relationship to authenticity, you
Uh,
know?
yes. Yes. Yeah.
Which really comes down to like shame, right? And that's really, I think we're going to end up talking a lot about is shame. Like how then this kind of led to all of these kind of expressions of shame, which
Yeah.
is not to be confused with guilt, because guilt
No,
is
they're
when you
different.
actually do something wrong.
Right.
Shame is something different. Yeah. And
I
so
agree.
I grew up in Florida where, we were going to church most Sundays.
And
Eh,
that was the Catholic church or that was a Protestant church?
We were in the Catholic Church until I was 5. So
Okay.
I was baptized Catholic, but not confirmed, which we will touch on later.
Yes. Right. Yes.
I remember my dad's side of the family regularly reminding me that I was going to go to hell if I was not confirmed. Therefore, I
Right.
had to campaign my parents, who had
To
left the
confirm you.
Catholic Church, to confirm me, which is like completely ludicrous to say at all, ever, but especially to like a 7-year-old, you
And
know?
what a job for a little girl.
Right, exactly. Like what a task to hold. Like, okay, I'm gonna go to hell if I don't convince
Mhm.
my parents to
Yeah.
confirm me in a church that they don't even go to.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, or
what?
and obviously have switched their belief system to something completely different at this
Yeah.
point.
So we ended up going to Calvary Chapel, which is a non-denominational, not
Mhm.
quite evangelical, but like kind of. I mean, the other part of it is like I grew up with my grandmother on my dad's side would have the Catholic channel on the house all the time.
Mhm.
That was what she had.
Yep.
My other grandmother, my mom's mom, would have Benny Hinn
Mhm.
on TV all the time,
Yeah,
And
just
so it
a
was kind of like
polar opposite dynamics. Yeah.
polar opposite and like constant. You know what I mean? Like, and still, even I knew people who were more religious than me, who were like so religious they were homeschooled and like
Mhm.
homeschooled in
Yeah.
like a Christian curriculum or something. And I
Right.
remember thinking, like, oh, it's not so bad for me. And then now, as an adult, telling the stories that I do, people are like, whoa.
Yeah, I imagine that there was probably just like a constant conflict of loyalties in yourself between am I going to follow mom's religion or am I going to follow dad's religion? And probably switching mentally in your head multiple times all the time, probably.
Well, for me, I think maybe slightly different than you.
Mhm.
My parents were at least lockstep in their
Right. With
whatever
you. Yeah.
whatever church that we were going to go to, but those people, I grew up with my family, both sets of grandparents, a set of great grandparents, all my aunts and uncles living and
Mhm.
cousins living within 3 miles of where I grew up, right? So we were constantly around family.
Yeah,
And
same.
so those people still were influences in my life, and their beliefs
Mhm.
were influences in my
Right.
life. And regardless of whether I thought Catholicism was the way or, non-denominational Christianity was the way or whatever, the truth is, and will always remain, that I had multiple adults in my life telling me I was going to hell.
Right. Right.
Period. Unless I changed my parents' belief system or I changed the church that I was going to. Because it was like if you become a Catholic,
Yeah,
the
that's
non-denominationals are like, well, they're worshiping false idols and like
mhm.
their way isn't the way. And then if I remain non-denominational and get baptized that way, then I'm going to hell in the eyes of the
Right,
Catholics,
right.
And so
So
there was
you just
always,
can't win,
you
you
can't
know?
win. My God, imagine like just taking the religious aspect out of it. Imagine just telling a child
You can't win.
you are doomed to eternal misery
Mhm.
because you are not enough in the eyes of God to be saved, to go to heaven. You are never going to be doing enough. To
Yeah.
hold that at 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 or 16 or even 45
Mhm.
is like, it's sick.
Yeah, 100%. Um, as I don't think that I quite knew that entire story and the disparity of the 2 religions that I don't see how you didn't go completely out of your mind.
Well, I got out of the house as quickly as I could.
I mean, that's the thing is, like, we grow up,
Yeah.
and thank God we do,
When did
and
you
that
leave?
was when did I leave home? I turned 18 on April the 4th, 2000. I moved out on April the 5th, 2003. I stayed
Wow.
home 10 days after my 18th birthday, but I only stayed 10 days because I couldn't get the carpet cleaners done in the apartment that I rented. I had actually rented the apartment and went like the day I turned 18 to legally sign the document because I was of legal age to sign a binding contract at that point. So I had planned my escape for a long time and knew that I was, you know, that was the deal.
Yeah.
And I moved into an apartment in the next city over, an efficiency apartment. And, it was kind of like hell broke loose. I mean, I went wild during that period of time and had a great
Same.
time. But yeah, I got
I bet you did. I wish we'd
yeah.
known each other.
Yeah, right. I mean, it was a pretty good time. I lived right on near the college campus. There's a college in Johnson City, Tennessee, and I lived there. So, and I had lots of friends, and I was exploring myself. So, it was an interesting time in life. But yeah, I got out as quick as possible, and I just craved independence. It wasn't that I wasn't welcome to stay home because I absolutely was. So I can't, if my mother ends up listening to this, I don't blame her for that.
Yeah.
I craved independence. I was almost like a wild caged animal, and I knew that I had to get out of there and get away. And I had to go on. I had to go on and do my thing, or I was going to just go crazy.
Well, I think that that speaks to, I don't want to let this point pass, that because same, I
Hmm.
don't, my mom and dad never kicked me out of the house. They
No,
were
no,
always,
either.
in
No,
fact, my mom was always like, you always have a place here if things get
same.
hard in New
Yeah,
York City,
right.
which they did. But even still, I think that this is such an important point, is that when a home is created with, is built with the popsicle sticks of religion, let's
Hmm.
call them what they are, because it's like all of the judgment, the shame rooted, kind of values, if you want to call them that. It doesn't build a solid foundation for a home, for what we
Not
would want a
really.
home to be.
Yeah, no.
It builds a cage, truly.
Yes. Yes.
And even if that's inadvertent, even if it's, and you and I talk about this all the time, it's like, our parents, both our parents were young when they had us. And if
Teenagers.
they knew better, they would have done better. So this is not at all like
Yeah.
some kind of
Yeah, this isn't an
roast of
indictment.
my parents. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's not an indictment at all.
Well, not of my mom anyway. We
Right,
can
well,
indict my dad.
dad, and he's he has been, it sounds like. But, and I think that's important to talk about too, is and I think that my mother's made some comments to me in recent months about, how that she feels bad about the way that I grew up and some of the things that happened to me as a child. And I don't blame her because, again, I've made peace with the people that were surrounding me. If they had known better, they would have done better.
Yeah.
And it was just, also, it was a different time. And I think that I don't have any anger towards anybody in my family for the issues that I've had to resolve with my religion trauma or
Yeah.
with anything else that happened to me. It is no one's fault really
Yeah.
because it's the same exact shit that was imprinted on them by their parents and the
Yes.
same exact shit that was imprinted on
Yes.
them by their parents. I mean, we could go back to the 1700s at this point. What do you expect? you know?
Well, I'm so glad you're bringing this up because I think about this weekly, if not most days.
Yeah.
What do you think makes you and I different that way? Like, what do you ever
Oh
wonder,
God, I
like,
wish I knew.
like, why did we get a glimmer of this? I can see outside of this generational pattern or this generational weight.
I c I well, so the very main answer that I have is I don't know,
Yeah.
but I have theories. I think that breaking away from the family unit is a big part of it. So, like, you
Yeah.
leaving Florida, going to New York, me leaving Kingsport, moving to Nashville, breaking away from the family unit. Also, I think that neurodivergent people, such as us,
Yeah.
tend to see the world differently than I think we're born with a discernment that a lot of people don't have.
My mom
And
used to tell me that.
yeah, and a natural ability to question things that other people may not question. A lot of people have always told me, "Oh, you're just such a good judge of character," and I'm like, "No, I'm a good judge of bullshit. Is what I'm a good judge of."
Yeah,
And
preach.
yeah, yeah, character, okay, but it's probably I can just smell bullshit better than you.
Yeah.
And I think that people like us, that's the key difference is we define our discernment and our discernment, and especially for me as a gay kid, was refined at a very, very early
Yep.
age because you had to constantly be with your head on a swivel and
Mhm.
looking for potential threats. And so you just refined your discernment much younger. And I think that my discernment continues to refine even to this day. I would say in 20 more years, I'll have a whole different level of discernment than I have at 40.
Yeah. Well, I think
Mhm.
um I first of all, I actually love where this conversation is going because I'm really
Me too.
excited to dig into this.
Yeah, it's going in a good
Is
spot.
Yeah, is the difference between like spirituality and
Mhm.
religion because I think to your point as I've gotten older, so my mom always said, Danielle, ever since I was younger, she'd say God uses you to speak to me, which is sweet and heavy.
I was gonna say that's a lot of responsibility, to be the medium for God and your mother.
Yeah, I know. But I think what she meant was like there were just some times that I would say something just the right way that would just hit her like a ton of bricks, and be the catalyst for a lot of change. And I think in some ways I've been that for other people throughout my life. But more importantly, she would also tell me, you have the gift of discernment. You have this
Mhm,
sixth sense about you. Never ignore your intuition. Never, ever, ever ignore it. That's God's way of speaking to you. And what I
mhm.
find really interesting about that is when I reflect back to my childhood, there were times that it was very strong. I hesitate to say like in a witchy way because like not in a
Yeah,
literal witchy way, but I mean like in that kind of freaky
in
like
a metaphysical way, yeah.
yes, where people are just like, whoa, people are willing to say in like religious coded terms, like, listen to your connection with God. But like the second you deviate from like whatever parameters that they have in mind for that, for what's safe there, they're like, "Ugh, that's freaky,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that's weird.
right, yeah, yeah.
That's witch stuff.
It's so funny that people will, I mean, you have to in order to be and understand and believe in Christianity, you have to believe in the metaphysical.
You have to.
It can't
Yes,
exist otherwise. So
truly.
but but Christians are so averse to a certain line that's drawn in the metaphysical world somewhere. It turns from guidance from God to evil. And I'm not sure
Exactly.
where it is, and I think it's different for different people,
Yeah,
but it is odd because it's like, well, yeah, religion can't exist without the metaphysical. So why are you afraid of the metaphysical?
exactly. Think I think as my intuition has gotten louder, as I have accepted so much more of the metaphysical, the things I cannot see, the things I cannot explain away, really loud messages from God in synchronicities and visions and
Mhm.
just like really hot intuitive hits, um, and followed those. My faith has gotten stronger. Like my faith in God and my relationship with God has gotten stronger. And it's just so interesting to me because I think examining the fact that, like, the further I've gotten away from the church, the stronger
The
my
closer
relationship
you've
with
got.
God
Did you
is
get
something to
that?
ponder.
I think I sent you this TikToker that I follow. Her name's Katie, and she's an Appalachian girl from like Eastern Kentucky. And I think I sent you the video, and she says, I may have left the church, but I took the Lord with me. And I've thought that quote of her resonated a lot with me is, I may have left the church, but I took the Lord with me. And
Yeah.
I feel like that, especially in the topic of discernment, anytime that I have gone against my better judgment, ignored my discernment, it has absolutely blown up in my face.
Yeah. It
I'm
hurts.
living in it right now
Yeah.
with my, at work. Like anytime that I have ignored it. So I can't sit and say that, that this doesn't exist, because there is some guiding light. Now, I don't know what it is. I don't necessarily have the belief system of God in heaven and the devil with the pitchfork in hell, but there is some factor at play here that guides us. And when I don't listen to it is usually when I get my ass handed to me.
Yes. Agreed. Agreed.
So we'll find out eventually what that is.
Well, here's the thing, too. This is all, I think in the past 2 years, especially, this has been really loud and really present in my life. I kind of went through a bit of a dark night of the soul, if you will,
Mhm.
examining myself, my own beliefs, my connection with God. And the thing that has come up for me a lot is like, what is heaven and what is hell? And do I believe in an afterlife? Do I believe in past lives? Do I believe in, you know, like how does the soul continue to live? How does
Yeah.
it live
Where
through
does it
eternity?
go?
Where does it
Yeah.
go? Because I had an experience a few years ago that I was like, "Oh, this is so profound and so deep and so immense that I can't deny that past lives are real." Like, I
I
know this
agree.
person so
Yeah,
deeply.
I agree.
And so, it really got me thinking, because it's like when you have a moment like that where you're like, well, if that's real, then where do we go when we die? Like you have to
Yeah,
really pull everything kind of starts to come apart, like
yeah,
whatever you were taught. And I've come to this conclusion that I do believe in multiple lives. And I believe that heaven and hell are on earth.
yeah.
Because when you don't, I think we all are calibrated to be connected with God, for one. Whatever you want to, and this isn't also an indictment on religion necessarily either. I
Right,
do think that there are plenty of really wonderful people who understand and are connected and find a true connection to God in whatever church or belief system or whatever it is. And that it's not necessarily detrimental, right? Like I think
right,
that there can be really
right. Oh,
solid
yeah,
community
yeah,
found.
absolutely, absolutely.
But I think we all have the potential to be connected to God. And I think that the people who choose not to be aligned with their gifts,
Mhm,
with God, with that intuitive connection are, as you said, as you deviate more and more, you get your ass handed to you more and more, right?
mhm,
And so I choose to believe that the people in this world who are evil or adjacent to evil or just not really aligned with God, with a
mhm.
higher power and whatever their higher version of their self is, that every day they're experiencing hell. Every day to be them and to look at themselves in the mirror and to go about the world like that, so void of genuine, warm human connection, is
Yeah,
hell.
I can't imagine that it wouldn't be, and I know people like you're describing.
Yeah.
I know people that I could, not to name names, but I could think of half a dozen people that I know that have crossed my path in the last 5 years that I'm just like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like how miserable it must be to be them. And
Truly.
maybe that is the eternal torment. Maybe that person comes back that way, and that's their eternal hell is just coming back as a self-loathing soul for the rest of all of eternity. I'm in the same boat. I mean, I believe that I don't know what happens after you die. I can tell you that I'm not afraid of it.
Yeah.
I think that it I think several things could happen. I think I believe you could come back. I think you can stay over, of course, we've all been to some psychics that have given us some pretty descriptive ideas of what
I
we've done
think
in the past. But,
I
especially,
hope there
that
was always
one.
an owl on your shoulder.
There's always been an owl, obviously I've got a lot of trauma from my time as a bayou mermaid. But but I can tell you that I was born old.
Yeah,
And
same.
everyone tells me that, and everyone tells me you are just so old and your soul is so old, and everybody metaphysically connected has told me that. So, and I'm very tired. All of so it's just like, and like one psychic one time told me that I had lived 900 years, and I'm like, it's no wonder I'm just so exhausted. Maybe I should take a couple of 100 years off this time. Yeah, but I think that you're right. I think that, at least for me anyway, anytime that I have strayed away from my discernment, from whatever gift that is, from whatever force that has given me that gift, I have gotten.
Yeah, yeah.
So I believe in that for sure. And it's just interesting how that what we're talking about, that it has nothing to do with actual religion or the church.
No.
Like, we're talking about maybe a deeper connection to this, the universe outside of your own consciousness. It's totally opposite of religion. We would
Well,
probably be looked down upon thinking that we were getting our power from the devil.
well, yeah, 100%. But I think therein lies
Hmm.
something that I always had such a problem with in the churches that I went to was it felt like a control mechanism, right?
Well, it was, yeah.
But by man.
Yeah,
And like, let's
yeah,
be clear, by man.
absolutely.
Churches get money, right?
Oh
Like
God, yeah.
churches make money. They have agendas. The leaders are human, right? And yes, I
And
don't
they
think that
have human motivations.
exactly. I don't think that all pastors or all religious leaders are somehow, all I don't think they're inherently evil
No.
necessarily. I think some are, but like i- you know, a certain kind of person is attracted to that kind of leadership and power, right?
Right.
And so one, I agree with you on the discernment. I think I actually fine-tuned that in the church, to be honest,
Same.
and not for the
Same.
reasons that people think. It's not
Right.
because the church wanted me
Right.
to have a
Right. Yeah.
fine-tuned discernment. Let me just
Right.
say
It's
that.
because it put you in the position to have to fine tune it.
Yeah, but then
Yeah.
I think also for me it felt like noise.
Yes.
For me it felt like human noise. And
Noise. Noise.
and it was overwhelming to me. The delivery was overwhelming. The size of the classroom, if you will, like the
Was
size of the
overwhelming.
church was
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Yeah.
The aggression was overwhelming. And to be honest, my pastor wasn't even the worst of the like
Yeah.
fiery pulpit style. And I just thought to myself, the God I know it isn't doesn't need all this.
Mm.
This is a lot. This is a lot.
Mhm.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like,
We don't need a coffee bar. No, you're right. Since we're talking about the church, like, I think it's important, like, let's set the Catholic Church aside for a second, because the
yeah,
Catholic Church is,
its
and
own
that is
thing.
one thing that Daniel and I, in our relationship, because we could not be any more different, that we've had a lot of discussions around, because he didn't understand and I didn't understand. I didn't understand the Catholic Church basically functioned as an entire body, literally,
Hmm.
like almost like a multi-level marketing all the way up to the very top, and it dictated all the way down. As you know, Baptist church, Protestant churches, that's not the same. They're almost like independent businesses. But so in the Protestant church, I've never been anything but a Baptist, so I can only speak to that. But I do believe there are people who are called and feel called to preach the word of God. But at the same time, I think that a lot of, especially now, churches are businesses.
Yeah.
They are businesses. They are run like businesses, and they have goals that are related to the business of a church, and you talk about control, and a business cannot survive without revenue.
Yeah.
And, it was just like that social experiment where that lady called all of those churches trying to get them to feed her non-existent screaming child. And, she met with nothing but bureaucracy. I think at one point I thought, if she really wanted to feed a screaming, call a gay bar
Yeah.
and see who answers the phone there and see if they'll feed a kid, and
Yep.
I feel like that just the modern church has been so bastardized
Yeah.
that it is just a business.
Truly.
It's
And
a social club.
a social club,
Mhm.
100%. And I think I always felt uncomfortable in those social clubs. There was one church, I will say there was one church in Port St. Lucie that we went to,
Mhm.
Morningside Church, when we lived there up until I was 9. That was probably the only church I've ever felt at home in.
Mm.
And because when my mom was sick, they would make sure that we were fed. We were
Right.
poor. And so if we were light on food, they had food
They
pantries.
took
People
care of
were,
you.
but it was not, but I think what was so deeply human about them was that it did not ever feel performative,
Yeah, it was
was
genuine.
that people genuinely cared. They genuinely cared about my family. And even through, my dad's arrest and conviction, through some
Mhm.
pretty horrific things, they still showed up for our family. Even though, we had left and gone to Palm Bay, an hour north, and then
Right.
my parents ended up moving back after like many, many years back to Port St. Lucie. They still knew us. They still knew us and they still
Yeah.
cared and they still wanted to help.
Right.
Um but what I find so interesting is that that was one church out of probably 15 churches that I was exposed to when my parents would move around and then I'd go back home for a holiday and they'd be like, "Oh, come to our new church." And
Mhm.
I remember at one point my sister and I, it was probably the hardest we'd laughed. My sister and I regularly almost get kicked out of church whenever we've had to go. As adults, by the way. We
Right.
wouldn't dare as children, but as
Right.
adults.
As adults. Yeah.
And it was like, I don't know, this must have been 5 or 6 years ago at this point. But we go to my mom's new church with her new husband at the time, my stepdad, Bill, and they don't go to church regularly now, but there was one down the street that they wanted to check out, and so it was like my sister, my brother and his wife and me, I think Jacob, my ex-husband,
Mhm.
and so we're like, all right, fine, we'll go to the Christmas Eve service. Like we
Yeah.
haven't been to a Christmas Eve service in a long time. And we go and we're sitting and it's just like this massive building, not quite a mega church, not
Yeah.
like that, but it
But
was still like a
adjacent.
big
Yeah.
church. And the stage is like austere. It's
Mhm.
like clean with like very modern decor
Mhm.
and like a tiny glass
Pulpit.
pulpit with a Mac computer on it flipped
Oh
up.
God almighty. Okay.
And you just see the Apple logo. And I'm like sitting and I'm like taking it in because I'm like, oh, this is different, than like the ones I went to as a kid, which were like wide range, but not quite like this.
Right, yeah.
And I look over at my sister, like dead ass. And I was like, oh, I thought we were going to Christmas Eve service, not the newest iPhone release. And my sister like fell out of her chair laughing her ass off. And of course, my sister has like a laugh that I can't, like, it's like it ignites something in me ever since we were
You
kids. Like, if she's
can't she
laughing, I
can't do
can't
it
not
alone.
laugh. Yeah,
Yeah.
I cannot not laugh when my sister laughs. So we're like laughing, crying. I'm
Mhm.
crying. Like, and the pastor gets on and we're like third row in and
Mhm.
he's just staring at us. Cause
Has no idea why.
I'm like the absurdity of all of this. And he like gets on and he's like dressed in like basically might as well be an Apple launch, like all
Yeah.
black and like has the headset and everything. And it's
God.
just like his presence is doing nothing to like minimize the like Apple aesthetic. If anything, it's enhancing it. And my sister and I, like, my mom was like, you guys, we got like scolded by my mom because we were laughing so hard. But it was just like it was the modern illustration of like what so many churches have become. And I
Well,
just
they
immediately,
had to evolve to appeal.
I mean, I feel like I blacked
Yeah.
out. I don't even remember the
Yeah.
rest of the service. That's the only
Right,
part I
right.
remember was how
Right.
hilarious it was that
Yeah, and well, was that church full of young people?
ish, yeah, I
Yeah,
guess.
I feel
I
like that they've
guess.
had to evolve too. I mean, honestly, the church that I was raised in has never changed. It's still to this day, and the only reason I know what it looks like is because it's on YouTube. But it hasn't changed, but it's also full of geriatric people. So I feel like in order to, you've you've got to evolve to keep the next generation coming in. So that sounds like that was
Yeah.
a newer church that was trying to attract young couples. And it's funny because I remember there being discussions in the church about, their goal was to attract more new young couples.
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't think anything of that. But now I'm like, God, that almost sounds like Tupperware. I mean, like, yeah, it's like, okay, we've got to get more people and we got to get younger people because a lot of these parishioners are going to die off soon. And, we got to have more
Yeah.
people coming in because we have to feed the beast. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, how
But
weird is that?
it is weird because I think
Mhm.
it's still a brand of performative spirituality in
Yes.
that I personally need my container for my connection with God and that community that is like-minded to be as simple as possible.
Yeah.
No frills, no performance, no
Yeah.
spiritual talk. The second you start, and this is how I am, by the way, with everyone talking about
Hmm.
discernment, is that the second you start using some like spiritual lingo, whether that's Christianity or New Age spirituality or anything in
Hmm.
between, you lose me
Yeah.
because you're like looking to a glossary to express
Hmm.
your connection with a higher power, and you're trying to like get people to buy in and show that like you know what you're talking about, and like
Yeah.
and the performance kills me, like it
I
actually hurts.
I agree. I can't stand performative religion. And it is so in our face right now, especially after Charlie Kirk. Like the performative religious, I mean, widow in a gold sequin suit. I mean, like, what the hell is that? Like, I mean, like we're calling that religion.
It's
It's
smoke and
like,
mirrors, and
yeah,
frankly, dare I say, it's evil.
it it is evil. That is evil.
Bringing
Yeah,
that kind of performance to people who are seeking
help
guidance is offensive.
is evil. It is a commandment. Thou shalt not worship false idols. And that is what I have thought throughout this entire, not that we were going to cover Charlie Kirk, but he was a great demonstration. I mean, obviously, I was not a fan of Charlie Kirk, but the hardest thing for me is so many people that were literally worshiping this man, that people do it to Trump. I
I
mean, they
know.
worship this man and they akin him to literally Jesus Christ. And I'm like, that is so evil. That is it's on the thing that you have hanging on the damn wall. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
like, how do you not see that this is a false idol? This is a false prophet. What the hell are you doing? Like, it is so obvious to me, but we've seen that displayed and put on display so valiantly in the
Yeah.
last year, especially since Charlie Kirk's death and Trump. I mean, it's just so Christians, and that is just so evil. And I think that that leads maybe even to a good segue into the topic of Christian nationalism because that is just so evil.
Yeah.
And it is not my uncle that I love so dearly, and I have these conversations, deep conversations with, and we've had a lot of conversations about Christian nationalism and him trying to explain it to people. And he said, it is not the gospel.
Yeah.
And, but I think it is so hard for people to discern that.
Well, I think, and this
Mhm.
is, I'm gonna have to play devil's advocate here, no pun intended, but
Oops.
um but like I also see that though too in I think it's not just a Christian community. Like I actually think
Yeah,
it's just in our culture,
it
period.
is. It is. Uh-huh.
I think people right now are so disconnected from themselves and from something bigger than them, that they're reaching for anything possible to make them feel
Belonging.
belonging and a part of something.
Yeah.
And I think that's the root of it, right? And I think that's the root of religion, which is not inherently evil, right? Like
No.
people want community and people want to be able to speak openly with people who are like-minded, but that's not what's really happening so much
No,
in
it's
these
really not.
churches, you
It's
know? And
really
like
not what's happening.
that's the whole point. And I
Well,
think that
they're being preyed upon. If you think about it, like, they're being preyed upon. Yes, it is human nature to reach for connection. And I think that the world that we're living in, 100% agree. Everyone is so disconnected from their self and they're disconnected from each other and they're literally just clawing at anything they can get a hold of to make themselves their central nervous system calm down. And all the while when they go to the church, the biggest the biggest win for the political movement, especially for the GOP, was to get control of the church.
yeah,
And if you can control the people in the church, you can control the world because those people, it's just so evil if someone that is looking for belonging and for community and for reassurance, and you're giving it to them, but the salvation has a cost, and the
yeah,
cost is loyalty. That's been
loyalty.
my expense my experience is the cost, the tax is loyalty.
Yep.
And what is a good word for unquestioning? Unquestioning loyalty. That's the price
Yeah.
that you pay for that, in my opinion.
So I think in my own kind of path to aligning better alignment with my higher power. I like to call the higher power God, but I don't think
Mhm.
of God as like Big Daddy in the sky. I think of God as like a higher energy that connects us all. But anyway, when I think about when I'm my healthiest, my spiritual hygiene, which I am going to have my friend on to talk about, we're actually going to have an episode about spiritual hygiene. I think about how being alone is the most spiritual thing I can do. My moments that I've been the closest to God
Mhm.
are when I've been like in the dark alone.
Mhm.
Literally, like at my lowest or at my highest too. You know, I think
Mhm.
there's also a duality in that too. And that kind of goes back into like heaven on earth too. We talked about what hell on earth might look like. But we also I think when I do act in alignment with my intuition, with the things that those downloads, those hits that I get, that I'm like, okay, I need to follow this. This is clearly important for me. This is a perspective shift that I really needed, whatever it is. When I do follow that, I see the beauty and the love and the joy in so many more moments, regardless of what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that those moments are heaven on earth, right? And so I you know, I think for so long growing up, I would hear, not necessarily in the church, but like from other people, like, God is within you. And I was like, what the does that mean?
Right. But I think that it's possible that that's the truth. Yeah.
100% that's the truth.
Yeah.
God is not in your pastor necessarily. Like that's not where you need to find God. You don't need to go to your pastor to find God. You don't need to go to your bishop to find God. You don't need to
Mhm.
go to your spiritual woo-woo retreat leader guru to find
Right.
God. You don't need to, you know what I mean? Like
Look inward.
you got to look inward.
Yeah, look inward.
And it sounds so cheesy because right now we're seeing
Mhm.
spirituality also become a product, a consumerist product, right? Like so many of
Merchandise. I mean, you know, like
yeah, truly. We are writing heavily about it in my writers workshop. A lot of people are
Mhm.
touching on this of this like, oh, look, this like regenerative, restorative, ritual kit. Everything's ritual and everything's
Yeah,
sacred and everything is
yeah,
like, like there's a retreat for that. Just go on Instagram and you can find a
right.
retreat and you see it everywhere with
Yeah,
everything
everything's been capitalized.
completely.
Yeah.
And that's no different than a church. It's a different side of the
No.
same coin,
No, it's just
right? Anyway, I should stop being so self-righteous. I'm suddenly acutely aware of that. But
no, I think it's absolutely true, and you've just seen the capitalization of religion, and you've seen the capitalization of self-discovery, and I mean, isn't that the American way, though? I mean, isn't it that just
Yes.
Isn't that just the American curse of literally we will take anything humanly possible and capitalize it no matter what it is or what it's intended for?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
which I mean doesn't create, great circumstances for healing.
No, and in fact, it's does create such a disconnect for people like us who can
Mhm.
discern
Right.
the insincerity or the kind of ulterior motives around, you know,
Mhm. Yeah.
particular
Yeah.
spiritual leaders. It creates a disconnect then because then you carry immense shame for not being bought in. You're like, what's
Oh,
wrong with me?
thank God. Yes, yes, yes.
I must
Right.
not be savable. Like I remember that all the time.
Uh-huh.
I'd be at church and there'd be people like eyes closed,
Yeah,
hands up,
hands to
making
the
like a show
sky. Yeah.
of how saved and like in love with
They
Jesus they were. And
feel
it
the
was like
spirit
such a
move
show.
them. Yeah.
And I would just be looking at him like, I don't feel it. What
Yeah,
is
like
wrong
what
with
is
me?
wrong with me that I don't feel the need to stand and raise my hands to the sky and shout to the Lord all it be, like, and I went through that. I mean, because I'm just like, I
Yeah,
mean, am
I
I missing
remember
something here? Like, like,
it felt like, and I think this is really powerful feedback for me,
mm-hmm.
spiritual feedback for me in that moment, was it felt like a magnet was keeping my hand down. I would
Yeah.
try, and I was like, this is so disingenuous that I can't do it.
Right,
I
right. It
can't.
was almost like you forgot to take the Molly. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, and you're just like everyone else is having some sort of experience and I'm not, but I can't have this internal battle with myself to pretend I am, like
yeah.
yeah, I've been there with that too.
But I mean, like that is, let's talk about the shame. The shame is a plenty coming out of
Mm.
being raised in a church like that, or any church that you feel there's an incongruence with your actual value system and theirs, and like how that's manifested in adulthood. Because I know for me, so much of my shame that I have carried and have worked, I would say, is probably the bulk of my personal suppression and personal misery has been just carrying around the shame that truly wasn't mine to carry to begin with, but
Mhm.
around sex, around being a woman.
Mhm.
I remember like sex was the worst thing you could do in my house.
Yeah.
I remember, the word feminazi being thrown around at the dinner table when we were at my grandparents' house. Even sometimes my dad would say it that, somehow being a feminist meant that you were essentially a terrorist. If we're being
Right.
literal with the word
Yeah, like
feminazi, it's
you
like
were yeah.
Nazis were terrorists. And so to say that you stand up for women's rights meant that you were too,
Yeah.
that you think women should be equal and whatnot. I grew up thinking that to be good was never enough. Actually, you being good was never enough to get you into heaven. You had to be saved.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And you had to believe with all of your heart and all of your soul that Jesus was your savior. And
Yeah.
that anyone who didn't believe it, and this is where I was like, no, I'm not bought in and I will never be bought into this, is that anyone who didn't believe that Jesus was their savior was going to hell.
Did
And
did you ever get any exceptions to that though? Did you ever question
oh, believe
that?
me, I questioned
Were you ever
as
given any
early as I
exceptions?
could talk.
Yeah.
So never any that were firm because I think my
Okay.
parents didn't know either, right? And I'd be like, okay, well, what about babies in Africa?
There
You
you
know?
go. Yeah.
Like, what about the people, what about these kids that are, because they'd be like, well, it's our responsibility. That's why mission trips exist, is it's our
Yep.
responsibility to go
Yep.
out and make sure as many people are saved as possible. And
Yep.
and so that's why it's important. I said, okay, well, what about the areas that we're not going to? Like, what
Right.
about those
And like
like that doesn't make any sense. So, and
mhm.
then same with like babies. I was like, well, what about babies? Babies don't have consciousness to accept Christ as their
Yeah.
savior. Do they all go to hell? And I swear to you, Jason, I still probably I went through every variation of a human who could possibly
Mhm.
not be saved with my
Right.
parents.
To see if they got a get out of jail free card. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm like,
I did
do you
too.
understand?
Yeah, I did too. Mine, of course, was children, and I was told that, like, essentially the explanation I was given was if they had not had time to, come to Christ yet, that they like had like a, they were grandfathered in. And like, the whole like, okay, well, what about people in China? What about Buddhism and all of that? And it's like, well, that they're grandfathered in because they don't know any better. And I'm like, okay.
No, they didn't get grandfathered in my version.
Yeah, in my version, there were a lot of people that just kind of got grandfathered in
The
just
kids
because
did mostly.
yeah, kids, of course, the kids did, women and children first. But like, it was almost like there was all these exemptions and things because we, as Christian soldiers, hadn't gotten to them yet.
Right.
Which never made any sense to me. And God only knows, I probably got about 3 or 4 different versions of who was
Yeah.
exempt, and the list probably changed each time.
Every time. And that to me was why I was like, okay, so it's a moving target. So you're
Yeah.
telling me that somebody's eternal damnation is a moving target.
Right. Okay,
You
this
know what I
doesn't
mean?
set well. Like, this game doesn't seem
Like, if
fair.
you're gonna make rules, keep them, man. And so that I very early on was very skeptical and questioned so much.
Same.
And
Which was not received well.
no,
Questioning was not, you weren't allowed to question. You shouldn't question. That was naughty. It was a no-no. We don't, questioning was that was the enemy tempting you.
but also I think this plays into kind of the very personal shame, right? Which is to your point, you talked about being neurodivergent and discerning, and how that manifested for me as a young kid was constantly asking questions. I questioned everything. If I were my parent, I would be exhausted by 9 a.m. You know what I
Oh,
mean? Like,
I'm sure. Yeah. Right.
and so there's that part of me that's like, that's highly relatable, that my parents were like just short of like shut up, because you're
Right.
just like, I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know everything. I surrender.
Yes. You got me.
Nico says that all the time. He goes, I surrender you. And I'm like, you know what, bud?
Yeah.
But like, beyond that though, I was always like, too much, it was too much. And so I carried that with me as part of my identity, that my asking too many questions, by poking holes in people's assumptions or people's beliefs, that all of that meant I was too much and
Yes.
impolite and too aggressive, and
evil.
And it
That
taught
was
me to
evil.
shrink.
Yeah, to
It
shrink
taught me to
down.
shrink, to ask fewer questions, to just go along. Just please, for the love of God, pick the path of least resistance.
Yes.
And that, my friends, is how you get primed and groomed for what is happening in the world right now.
Yes.
And it is a
Yes.
tool. It's a tool. It's a groupthink thing. I am so allergic to groupthink that if I get a whiff of it, I'm like, I'm out. I'm out. I will never, ever let anybody else suppress that part of me again.
Right.
And tell me that it's wrong to ask questions.
Because it triggers all of that trauma from, yeah, I understand that too. Totally. I think, and you mentioned the word groomed. We've reached almost like a pinnacle of grooming where so many people have been groomed by religion and the church to think that a 79-year-old obese Nepo baby is the second coming of Christ. And you look at people that like, you're like, you're an intelligent person. I know that you can think, like, how do you, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, and it just has to be some sort of deep psychological reaction, like, that people will give up reason.
Well, yes, it is something that what I learned through some of my own childhood trauma is that when people tell you something enough about yourself, about what is good, about what is right, about what it means to be a holy person, and they tell it to you enough, you believe it.
You will believe
that becomes your reality. Because that's the way human brains are made, right? Like, if you keep yourself in the right environment, surrounded by the right people, when I say right, I mean like the people who will perpetuate this,
Right. The people
if you
that
hold
are,
all of
yeah.
those circumstances steady for long enough, you're going to believe whatever it is they're selling to you, right? Like, I hesitate to call religion a cult because I don't believe that all religions are cults, and I don't believe
No.
that every
Yeah.
church is a cult.
No.
However, I do think that the ones that are not acting in true, like as a true extension of God, I guess I'll say, are culty. I do
Yeah.
believe that. And I think that
I would
it's
agree with that.
a perfect breeding ground for Christian nationalism, which is like
Hmm.
where you start to see things like I was taught in the church, which was like you follow
Yep.
your husband no matter what.
Yep.
You follow him, you
And don't ask questions.
submit,
Hmm.
you don't ask questions, and then we see the answer to that right now, which is like the USA breeding trad wives, which is so ironic because the widow
Hmm.
herself is now the CEO of the business and has gained
Yeah.
multi-millions of dollars since her
Right.
husband's murder.
And yes.
They're
Hmm.
literally telling people like this is the way it should be. I'll use that micro example
Hmm.
of, women should be traditional wives,
Yes.
and they're making millions. She
Is
is
making
making
millions of
millions off
dollars a
of it
day
as
off
the
of
CEO.
selling that, of selling that dream, I guess, lie, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
And
It,
there's people
it,
that believe that
and they
don't see
believe
the
it. They believe
conflict.
it with all their heart. And you're just like, and, but yeah, I mean, that's what I mean, that is exactly the preachings of the Southern Baptist Church is women are to submit to your husbands. You don't ask questions. Divorce was shameful.
So shameful.
So shameful, so tragic. I've heard that word so many times. It's so tragic. And who the hell knows? Like it didn't matter that the dude beat her every other week and
Like
cheated
that
on
wasn't the
her.
tragic part.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
tragic part was that marriage failed and that home is broken and
My mom, so my dad, I don't think I've said this explicitly on the
Mhm.
podcast, but I am right now, which is that my dad was arrested and convicted of possession and distribution of CSAM and went to prison in a federal investigation for soliciting it from an undercover Swiss police officer. And it was
Mhm.
massive news in the Florida area. And it was eh, devastating, humiliating. There were so many things and so many other layers that came of that. But um, basically, long story short, when he went to prison, my parents were high school sweethearts. They were married for, I think, 27 years at the time. And my dad's sister, so part of the Catholic side of the family, took my mom in because she lost everything. She
Yeah.
didn't work. My dad worked, and so everything went away. He didn't have
Mm.
savings, even though he was making a
Yeah.
lot of
It
money. Can't
was
really
gone.
account for where all that money went.
Yeah.
She had to sell the house, had to sell the cars, which I, helped her do. And so, anyway, all of this happened. My aunt took her in and was like, you have a place to stay here. And then when my mom finally decided that she would divorce my dad, which was very shortly after his
Mhm.
sentencing.
Right, and he was sentenced
Sh
for a significant amount of time, right?
he was sentenced for almost 8 years. And also for, sex crimes, right?
Right,
Like
I mean, it's
for
not like for
pedophilia.
shoplifting, I mean, this
Yeah.
is sexual,
This isn't
yeah,
fraud.
yeah,
This isn't,
right. This is
so like
kiddie porn, yeah.
let's be clear, but sh- she disowned her.
Mhm.
My aunt said like she was more crushed by my parents divorcing than what her own brother had done. And she even said to my mom that she was not family anymore. After 27 years, by the
Right,
way,
right.
that she was no longer part of the family because she divorced my dad. And I I was like, if that doesn't illustrate how the church is meant to protect abusers.
My
Because to
god,
your
yeah.
point, you're getting beat by your husband. That's not enough of a
Mhm,
reason to leave.
mhm,
Oh, your husband is abusing the children or
mm,
has a problem. Nope, that's not what a good wife does. She doesn't leave.
mhm,
And
yep,
so then you start to realize like just how much of a control mechanism the church is. That divorce is almost never for the benefit of a man. It's usually
no,
for the benefit and the safety of a
mhm,
woman.
yes,
And how the church is so complicit in keeping women small and controlled and abused and in incredibly toxic
Isolated. Yeah,
isolated.
isolated. Very isolated, I think, which is very culty.
Super culty. Like,
Isolation is one of the big key elements of cults. So yeah, I grew up with the shame of divorce. So this is a true story. So my mother, when she married the second time, now mind you, we went to a very large church. It's probably not large by today's standards, but it was a big church.
mhm.
And I mean, my great grandfather was one of the founding members of this church back
Oh,
in
wow.
like way back when. So we were considered a prominent family in that church, very,
Okay.
very well vested in that church. And the pastor refused to marry my mother to her second husband
Oh, I believe it.
because it was considered adultery. So I remember on her wedding day, which happened to be 4 days after my birthday that year, I was 10, that we had to go pick up a pastor from some church. I don't know where the hell he came from or how we found him, but I went with my grandfather to pick up this pastor from a church over in a part of town called Lynn Garden. And we got this pastor, and we didn't know this man. We had no idea who this dude was. He was just a pastor that had agreed for $50 or whatever the hell it was to marry my mother to her second husband at my grandparents' house. They got married in their house because our pastor of the church that we had probably given thousands of dollars to, that my great grandfather built the first church with a hammer. He wouldn't marry my mother because she had been married before.
Oh, I feel that. I feel that. My grandmother, the last time I
Yeah.
spoke with her, she's still alive, but she called me like a few months ago to tell me specifically and only, this is basically the only part of the conversation, that if I were to ever touch another man, that I would be going to hell. Because I'm still married to my ex in the eyes of God, which is why when she left my abusive grandfather, she stayed single and alone for 20 plus years. And I just thought to myself, first of all, I dissociated during that conversation, if I'm being honest. I was just like, I think I'm blacking out.
Okay.
I was like, my grandmother has spent over 2 decades alone.
She believes that.
Alone. 2 decades.
Yep.
Because the church told her she would go to hell if she ever touched another man. Yeah. By the way, the only man that she touched was wildly abusive.
Yeah. And what a
like,
waste.
Is that okay? Is that like, where we, that's what we wanted to.
What a theft.
Yeah.
Of a life, of a soul, of a happiness. What a theft that was stolen. And
totally.
For what?
For what?
And for what? I mean, like, yeah, I mean, there's just, I could think of example after example of just some of the shit. When you say it out loud, you're just like, how the hell did anybody believe that?
I talk about it with my boyfriend. I talk about it with friends. Yeah. And like, I was talking about the Rapture thing with him.
Yes.
And I was like, I don't think he got it at first because he was not raised, but there was never any like aggressive religious propaganda, Well, I was like, I don't think you understand. Let me just spell this out. Could you imagine telling your son, who's 5 years old, that one day Christ our Lord.
We don't know when.
We don't know when.
Yeah.
It can happen any day. One day, he is going to take all those who are saved. And so there is a risk that you are not saved enough and you, child, get left behind. And so now you have to navigate the end times, the apocalypse, alone without your parents. And basically it can happen anytime, right? You'll be driving down on the highway and your parents will disappear and just their clothes will be left. Nobody really could get that straight though, because I was like, why would your body go? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And like, and then you have to navigate it alone. Like, what?
Not only do you have to navigate that alone, you have to navigate the tribulation
The tribulation, because now you have to figure out a
along
way to
with
save
it.
yourself in your
Right.
last ditch effort.
Right.
And you
Which, of
probably don't
course,
even
will be
understand
futile.
at 6 or 7 years old
Yeah.
why you were left behind to begin with, you know?
Yeah.
Like, imagine explaining that to a kid
And
then
believing it.
believing it.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly, I'm sure he was probably flabbergasted.
Oh,
You know?
he was like,
Yeah.
that's insane.
I had Daniel looking up the Rapture in ChatGPT the other night. Like, I mean, or that when we were talking about the Rapture, and I was explaining it to him, and he was like, "What are you talking?"
Yeah.
He was like looking at it in ChatGPT. So, and I think that this is a great place to round out with the Rapture, because of course the Rapture is Revelations, which is the last book of the Bible.
Yeah.
But so I was like, okay, I guess I was 13 or 14. I don't know how old I was, but so I somehow, through some means, became convinced that the rapture was going to happen and watch. I don't know
Right.
if you thought that, but like there were a lot of people that believed that that was,
A lot of it. Yeah.
that was where, that was it. That was what was going to happen. And so I spent pretty much like the entire, 1999, like, I guess evaluating myself. Okay, well, am I 60% saved? Am I 40%?
Yeah.
Like, what should I do?
What's the certainty?
Right? Like, what should I do in September to get to 71.5? Like, because everyone was just convinced. And I just remember that being like one of the most stressful years of my life. And I actually failed school that year.
Whoa.
I failed the 8th grade, and I had to go to summer school that year. And I wonder if that contributed to me failing school that year. Like,
Yeah.
because I was constantly like trying to keep a mental Excel spreadsheet of how saved I was. And I remember at one point just like thinking like, well, I'll just do the best I can, until the end, and then whatever happens, man.
Well, I would be curious to know how much religious trauma like that instigates like OCD in people, like the
Oh, yeah.
concurrence,
Oh, yeah.
or is that the word? Whatever. But like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you're right. Like, similarly, you're just like constantly running a tab of the good
Yeah.
and the bad and the good
Right.
and the bad, which is like not the point.
Well, and especially at the age that we were at. So, in your brain is developing all these new neural pathways and all that. So, you get stuck in an obsessive task of evaluating whether or not you're going to, meet your demise in 10 months or not. So, I'm imagining that right there could have been the creation, because I'm a diagnosed obsessive compulsive 8 out of 10 on the scale. Maybe that was at that point well, I don't know. I know I've had obsessive compulsive tendencies my whole life, but I'm sure that didn't help. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure that us running like the strategy of how to survive the tribulation alone and being surrounded by adults who 100% believed it and talked about it nonstop, that had to develop my obsessive compulsive problem.
100%.
It helped.
Of
It
course, because why
definitely
wouldn't
helped
you?
make it. I mean,
Why wouldn't you? Because the stakes are the highest ever, right? You're talking about the eternal
yeah.
damnation of your soul.
Exactly. Life and death, eternal damnation, the loss of everything and you've ever possibly known. Okay, so then let me ask you this. Did you ever go to a judgment house?
No, but I'm
Okay.
intrigued.
Oh dear God. Okay, so I
Wait,
think
tell me something
okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, a judgment house, I believe, is a truly Southern Baptist thing, but they were essentially very popular around Halloween because, Halloween is of the devil.
Of the
And
devil.
so they were like an alternative to haunted houses, even though I still went to the haunted corn maze and all that too. But we would go to Judgment House. And so my first encounter with a mega church, there was a church in Kingsport called Higher Ground, and it's even it's massive compared to what it was then. But it was like the biggest church in town.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like the new, shout to the Lord, that kind of
Oh,
church,
yeah. Yeah.
And so
I know.
they had Judgment House. And so I remember like the youth groups, they would take you to Judgment House. It was an event to go to Judgment House. So anyways, to make long story short, they would set up a building and it was a haunted house. But instead of being haunted by ghosts and ghouls, like the first stop would be like a phased car accident and like, smoke billowing out of a car and a person with, fake blood and they're dead and their soul and the guy's screaming, no, come back. And he wasn't saved. And then his soul travels on and it gets to go through its like, life review and all of this crazy shit. And then another one might have been, I remember aborted babies. I remember like a young girl being
Whoa.
pregnant and she goes to the abortionist and she has the thing and no one's going to know. But then she dies and she stands before judgment of God and they bring up the dead baby. And it was where literally like you just watched a theatrical performance
Oh my
of
God.
different ways that you could end up in hell or your friends could end up in hell or your girlfriend, why you shouldn't have sex and knock your girlfriend up because if she has to have an abortion she's gonna go to hell, like, and
She's
so
gonna
it was like
die. She's gonna die and go to hell.
she's gonna
Like
die
she's gonna
and
die
go to
during the
hell.
abortion and yeah.
Right, exactly, of course, go to hell. So like
Woo!
basically it was a 60-minute like preview of multiple pathways to get to hell. At the end, the call to action is to lay down your wicked ways and accept the Lord into your heart and forgive.
Did they have like a baptism pool at the end for the people
Yes.
who felt urgent? Yeah.
Yes, yes, I'm not lying. They had a
I believe
heated
you.
like cattle feed metal tub thing that you could be baptized. And I mean, I think the conversion rate was pretty high.
But nothing says nothing says commitment to our Lord like panic after seeing a performance.
Like, okay, exactly. I've seen a theatrical performance of 7 different ways that me or close people can go to hell. So I should absolutely, recite this poem and now I should get dunked in this cattle tank.
And that'll take care of me.
Because I'm scared to death to drive home.
Because I'm scared. Yeah.
Seriously, I'm gonna find Judgment House TikToks to send to you. I think they were kind of a Southern
Please do. I'm fascinated by this.
They put them on, they still
kidding.
put them on. They still put them on. Churches still do Judgment Houses at Halloween, and it's just yeah.
But mostly, like real talk, right now, my heart feels heavy for people who see that.
Yeah, and it's
like
not
for
it is like for teenagers.
Because also, like, here's the reality, and even about abortion,
Yeah.
How many girlfriends I know who were raped as children.
Yeah.
As children, like 12, 13 years old, and had abortions, and then they go to church and they have to see that. And they're like the filth.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, right. I mean, how would you leave feeling? And I mean, this was literally a building that churches shipped teenagers to. Like to go through this traumatic experience. I don't know how many times I went, probably 3 or 4 times. And a lot of different churches put on different judgment houses, all had their own flair, but they were all the same thing.
How did that make you feel?
Oh, God, it was the most terrifying. At the time that I had gone to those, I'm not sure I'd quite accepted the homosexuality thing yet, but I certainly would. It was just like, it was the same feeling that I had when I walked through the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. I left there with the same, like, the gravity of, not necessarily the same feeling, but the gravity of how awful this is. That's what I left with, Judgment House. And of course, it was a confusion of, well, wait a minute. Do I need to get in the cattle tank? It was mortally confusing. And I'm thinking, well, if that was my experience and I am one soul, we're literally sending school buses of teenagers and adolescents through this thing. Like, what the hell kind of trauma did some of these people come out with? And I know that there were people there that experienced probably things like you just described. There were probably
Yeah.
14 and 15-year-old girls in the groups that I was in that were probably being abused,
Yeah.
some horrible situation. And yeah, it is any rate that the youth suicide rate is not higher than it was. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah. I think that that's one
Yeah.
thing I always struggled with was depression when I was a kid, like
Yeah.
heavily,
Yeah.
and feeling like I was never enough. And you know what? I
Yeah.
struggled with that feeling of I will never be good enough. I will never be good enough for love from other people, from God, from
Yes.
anyone
Yeah.
until just last year. And I'm 37 years old.
I know. I know. I completely
Like, I'm
understand.
37 years old and it's miraculous. Like, I'm 37 and I left home at 18 for New York to start undoing
And
that,
you've
right?
spent the last 19 years breaking that apart.
And some people never will. And I think that that's really the point of having this
that is the
conversation.
God's honest truth. And there are people that are within an arm's length of me that never have.
Yeah.
And that is the sad thing, is it's just that they missed so much.
Yeah. Well, because it's in service of not God.
The business.
It's in service of the business. It's in service of
Mhm.
the machine of the
Yeah.
church,
The business.
and does not account for messy humanity in any way. And that is what it is to be human, you know?
Right. Messy humanity is evil because that means you don't have the Spirit of God in you.
Well, and then on the flip side too, it's like, okay, so what you're saying is, you know, don't do any of these things. But if you do these evil things, that your get out of jail card is just saying that you believe in Jesus. Just believe that
Right.
Jesus
Yeah.
died for your sins.
Doesn't matter what.
God gives second chances. God forgives,
It-
but don't get a divorce.
By God, no, don't get a divorce.
That one is
That's the worst
unforgivable.
thing ever.
Anyway, I really appreciate having you on. I feel like we could
We could
I feel
go
like
on all night. I mean,
we could go
maybe.
on all night. And I also really enjoyed this episode because it is kind of meandering, but at the same time felt like the kind of conversation that you and I
Yeah,
normally have anyway.
it
And I
does,
think
yeah.
that people
Mhm.
are thinking hard about a lot of things right now.
I think
that we're at
so.
a crossroads of really knowing where our values are, what they are, where we stand. We can't be wishy-washy anymore. We gotta
Right.
know,
No,
like,
this ain't the
who,
time. Like, whose side are
Yeah.
you? You know, you got to be on the right side of history.
and who do you value? How do you connect with God, your higher power, your higher self, whatever you want to call it? And how do you live according to those values? And, you know, in that kind of self-examination, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I'm so grateful that you are my friend and a safe person
Same.
for me to talk to about this as
Same.
well.
We have such a good.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe we'll have a return segment for this.
Maybe. I mean,
feel
we could
like-
probably make this into a 3 or 4 part series, like,
Yeah.
because we, honestly, we covered very little of what we intended
I
to,
know.
but what
That's
we
what I was
covered is.
saying. I was thinking about that. I was like,
Yeah,
damn, this is the tip of
what
the
we
iceberg.
covered is really intense, and now you're gonna spend all night looking up TikToks about Judgment House, but like, just be glad you didn't have to go.
There are always people who were more religious. You know, it's like when I tell my friends how I grew up, they're like, wow, that is like
Yeah.
for real, you know?
No, it wasn't that bad. It could have been a lot worse, but oh God, yeah,
I like to think that way.
Yeah.
It makes me feel a little bit better.
It makes us feel better.
Like, I've got
This is
things to be
great.
grateful for.
We
which
do.
is-
We have a lot to be thankful for. And
Yeah.
one of them is that we broke free from that very caged way of thinking.
And that, more importantly, we can be ourselves.
Amen.
And that we're on this journey of truly being ourselves and reclaiming parts of ourselves that we lost along the way.
Amen, Sister Danielle. Amen, Miss Sister. Right?
Yes, Brother Jason. I love
Yes.
you so much.
I love you too.
Thank you again for being on the pod. And yeah, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining me for this intimate conversation on Not Like the Others. If this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. You can find links and information about everything we discussed today in the show notes. And if you want to continue the conversation, feel free to find me on Instagram at NotLikeTheOthersPod. Until next time, come find yourself in every story.